So, okay, right, and then we'll get going. Well, it is a real privilege to be part of the Learn Free conference again this year. Juliet has done such an amazing job taking it online for the second year running. So big round of applause to our gracious host. Yes, absolutely. And really grateful to be here with you. I do love I know we've got a global crowd this week, but I do love what we're developing and growing in the UK. And I'm so grateful for the groups of people who are really standing up for injustice and hearing our voice in the country to make sure that our children are protected and our voice is heard. So I've really appreciated being able to dip in, and I will be watching replays because doesn't come naturally to all of us to really fight that cause, but I'm glad we're in this together. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, and the title of the talk was The Challenge of Change. I do love alliteration, so kind of sounded great to put those words together. But I recognise, and Julia had talked, and I had talked a little bit about this whole past year, 14 months, 15 months, whatever it is now. We have globally experienced a massive transition, and our emotional health, our mental health, the impact on our rhythms and our family life has been shaken, and we've all had to deal with that in many different ways. But also within our home educating life, we are in a constant place of change. I don't know about you, but when I started out nearly 15 years ago now, I had all these wonderful romantic ideals. I mean, some of those came from what I was reading and who I was allowing to kind of speak into my life, not from my local setting, but just trying to learn and trying to absorb what other people were saying. And you do kind of create these beautiful ideals and these romantic ideas of how your kids are going to turn out. And you kind of think, you begin by thinking, well, I did. If 2 and 2 goes together, it will absolutely equals 4. And if I do these particular things at this stage of my children's life, if I read these books, if I do it this way, this is the result. But we're not cooking a recipe here, are we? We're actually raising children. We're not trying to come up with a formula. And there is no formula to parenting. There is no formula to educating or facilitating our children's education. We actually are, what I've realized in my many years of just being a practitioner of all the different kind of ways we've put into practice our ideas in our home educating life as a family, but also being a woman, being a mother, and then coming into a world of kind of sharing and speaking about this, is that we as parents, and I can't see all your faces, I will have a flick through of it later and say hello to you all, but we are the greatest asset in our home schools. We as mothers, as fathers, as grandparents, if we are not right, if we are not at peace, if we're not settled and convinced and convicted about what we're doing and why we're doing it, then the changes and the shaking and the transitions will be harder than ever, because we don't quite often know what the why is. Where did we start and where did we begin? Now, I don't think you can't access this talk anymore, but last year I spoke about a lot more about the longevity of homeschooling. So 10 ways to play the long game. And if you are interested if you didn't hear that, just email me. I'm sure I've got some notes I can send to you, or I've got it somewhere. But this whole idea of putting things in place for the long-term goal. I know when you have young children, we're often fighting fires, aren't we? We're often kind of tackling things like dealing with the spilt milk on the laptop, or the cat's just thrown up and you're trying to get the toddler out of it whilst doing a reading lesson with another child. There's so much going on, but there is so much power in playing the long game and really thinking about, how am I as an educator, how am I as a mother, as a father, whoever's listening, how am I, and what am I doing with myself? What am I inputting into myself? How am I caring and leading my own life to enable the fruit and freedom in my children's life? So that's really what we're going to get at today. And I've got 3 things that I'm going to really hone in on that we can put into practice in our lives to really see the fruit, the freedom, the long-term goals of not romanticism and perfect ideals, but actually being grateful for every day, actually realizing that these young people, these children, these, as Charlotte Mason says, and I will mention her in a moment, these born persons, that they will become who they will become, and that is to be celebrated. And I love that that's what Learn Free is about, and especially the community here, the Chew community that Juliet has really curated and built here. It's about celebrating children's lives, no matter what it looks like, no matter how our families are, no matter how they see the world. Children, it's about the children. And again, as Charlotte Mason says, I'll come back to her in case you don't know me harking on about her normally. She would always say it's for the children's sake. And that's what we're doing this for, isn't it? So I'm kind of saying it's about us, but we know it's about the children. But ultimately, whatever happens in us will be that you know, that is what is coming out of, that's what we're pouring out of into our children. I'm just going to give you a really quick bio in case we haven't met before, or in case you're watching on the replay and you and I haven't met before. But and you're saying, who is this woman? I just logged in and she's talking to me. But I am Leah. I live in Coventry. With my husband Dave. We've got 4 children. We are approaching, I think it's about 14 years of home educating. My husband is a director of an educational charity into secondary schools. So we really have our feet in both camps. We have a great understanding. We've both worked in education, and not qualified teachers, but in other roles, more working with kind of behaviour education stuff, and pastoral work. But he is a director of a charity. He works with secondary school kids, teachers, staff all the time. So we have an understanding across this scope of, you know, children and young people. Most of our adult lives, we've done children's work, youth work, ran youth projects. So we love it. You know, we are passionate about empowering the next generation, whatever that looks like. So we've got a lot of that experience under our belts. But we are, you know, this time we are continuing to home educate our children. My 2 older children, I know people like to know these details. So my eldest is 18, coming up for 19, youngest is 10 and a half. So our older 2 children opted at GCSE age, so year 10, I don't know all the ages and grades, but whatever age that is, they opted to do their GCSEs in a year 10 entry academy. So that was a real shift for us. And that was a mix. We've got mixed reviews on that decision, but my eldest daughter, became head girl in 6th form, and she has now finished that, and she's entered into full-time in the care industry because she wants to do a degree in nursing or paramedic science. So that's where she's heading. And she went to school to reception for 1 year. The rest of the time she was home with us. My next son, he finished GCSEs and then went straight into an apprenticeship to become an electrician. So 2 very different paths, but really from the same foundations. My younger 2 are still here with me, still here every day, we're home educating, and they are plotting a very different path, which is great as well. And we're happy to go along with that, which is amazing. But from the very beginning of our home schooling, our home educating, I was researching before we even began our journey, really. I read a lot about educational philosophy and totally fell hook, line and sinker for just really captivated by the Charlotte Mason educational philosophy. So some of you on here will know me talking about that most of the time. I can see some of your faces, and you will know that from my platform of Modern Miss Mason, but that's because she caught our attention from the way she approached children, how she saw children, how she saw childhood, and how she saw education. So we don't have to do all the, the detail and the methodology or the purist approach. It's really not what I'm about. If you've heard me talk before, it's not how I go about it. But it's the foundation of the philosophy which really has brought a lot of freedom in education, in my thinking, in our children, and in how I help and coach and train others. So really it's an expression of life, and it suited me to a T, because I am very much the kind of, I love poetry and literature and nature, and it was right up my street. Though there are many rigorous aspects of the philosophy, which are maths and science and geography and all the other stuff as well. So we do it all over here. So what I wanted to do is that these three things that I want to share, I just want to give you a bit of background, but these three things that I wanted to share with you today, which I hope will become a bit of an anchor in our adulting, in our home educating, in our parenting, really, are from a foundation of Charlotte Mason's work. But it's really, you don't have to be using the philosophy or methodology to take in what I've got to say today. So I'm not talking about implementing this philosophy with your children. I've taken the inspiration from her writing, because that's mostly what I read, and I'm writing a book about it all at the moment. So it's all in here. But I've got these three really inspirational ideas that hopefully will help us deal with change, deal with transition, deal with often the thrown up in the air style of our lives, that it can feel like that. And I'm just going to have a quick flick to see if we've got any dads in the room at the moment as well. I can see lots of, oh yes, we have. Great, fantastic. Okay, that's good. So in the early 90s, there was a homeschool mum and a writer called Karen Andriola, and she coined this phrase. She didn't really coin it herself, mother culture. So when I talk about that, I want dads as well to hear that as basically adult culture, as this kind of fathering and mothering way of approaching our lives and valuing our lives. And she picked this up from a magazine called The Parents Review. So it's not from Charlotte Mason's writing, it was somebody else who wrote about it. And they use this phrase, mother culture. And this was this idea of freely investing time into ourselves to do the things that bring us life. So whatever that looks like, you might have something that comes to mind straight away. I know that we've got people who crochet in the room and who knit. You might read, you might fish, you might hike, you might bake, you might do a myriad of things. And this idea of not just doing things out of necessity, but doing things to invest into ourselves, almost of a cultural way, of a cultural capital of investment, so that we would be able to approach our homeschooling in the world in a richer way. And she said this again, she used the phrase mothers, but please hear this for everybody. She said, if mothers, you will have heard this before, if you've heard me talking, or if you know the Charlotte Mason philosophy, this is used a lot, this quote. If mothers could only do for themselves what they do for their children, and then she talks about going out to play. If we would only do for ourselves what we do for our children, I mean, that might mean many different things to you today. If you think how, you're here on a conference because you want to invest in your children, you are asking on forums about curriculum choices and books, and because you want to invest in your children, you are concerned over your children. You are seeking advice about things in government and politics because you are concerned for your children's welfare and education. And in this context, when she was talking, she was really talking about the way we lay out this beautiful feast of education. But I like to really think of it as, if we actually approached our own lives and ourselves the way we invested and approached our children's lives, I wonder what a difference that would make to our mental and emotional journey. And the thing is with this, which is interesting, isn't it? There's this huge chasm between your 10-year-old daughter and your 42-year-old self. I'm just, however old you are, 36, we'll say that instead. We'll lower the age. There's a huge chasm in life stages. Our children have no limits in their thinking generally. They have no creative boundaries when they're young. as a community, as homeschoolers, we are committed to allowing space for our children to fully embrace the wonder of childhood. But you and I, as mothers and fathers, carers, grandparents, we have been wounded by words. We've been lost in disappointment. We've been hurt in relationships. You name it, we've walked it. And somewhere along the road, our identity gets muddled up in the waters of life, and we end up comparing and criticizing ourselves, and we become these very complex beings. And here's this message of, if you could only do for yourselves what you do for your children, our homes would be happy. That's what she says. We would have these happier homes. And how interesting. What does that really mean? And I really believe, and this is a kind of a thing that I focus on and think about and talk about, that the strength of our identity as parents, as mothers and fathers, is the kryptonite of comparison, of criticism, of complexity, and how we handle change. So this is really about you, mother, father. It's about us. How are we actually leading our lives and leading ourselves? So I'm just going to go through these 3 things, and hopefully they'll stay with you and they will solidify something. And I really hope that even there's a practical element that you can put into practice today about actually, I know you're tired. I know that you are weary. It gets to May, and this conference has been a great week, and you feel encouraged and you're sparked with ideas, but you're kind of on the home stretch before maybe wrapping up for the summer, and then you can think about next year, September. And I know, I get it. I get those feelings. I've been in this a long time, but I want to tell you that you are doing an amazing job. You are the best people to do this. And I know you've been hearing that all week. And I just want to spend some time making sure that you feel, as we wrap up this conference, as you feel encouraged and strengthened and championed into the next season of your homeschooling. So the 3 things that I'm going to just go through now in the time we've got are these. And if you're a note taker, to grow, to play, and to stand. These are the 3 instructions that I have read and researched, and it has come out of my work understanding the Charlotte Mason philosophy, but not necessarily implementing it with our children. So I know that you're here from all different understandings and spheres of educational beliefs and convictions, and that's great. But these 3 things are for all of us. So to grow, to play, and to stand. And I hope that we can do all 3 of these as we move forward together. So to grow, Charlotte Mason really encourages, and I know I'm sure within every academic and every educational philosophy and teaching would encourage the teacher parent to continue to grow, to stay intellectually alive. You don't have to be super smart to do that. You just have to be on the learning journey forever. And I love this because, yes, I went to university and I'm sat in a room full of books, but I'm not the person to be doing a doctorate and writing papers. I actually love learning. I love learning alongside my children. I love reading. I love listening to podcasts and interviews. I love that kind of continual watering and sowing seed, not necessarily to prove a point, but just because it's part of who I am and I know it enriches me. So she put this message out there, and this is a great one for all of us, to stay intellectually alive, to stay alive in our learning, our growing, our hunger to and not just, let me just say this as well, don't just read homeschool books. Allow yourself to read some fiction, allow yourself to read something really different. And I have to do this. I'm like, I must widen my view and keep my perspective varied, because I can get quite like tunnel vision about what I read and what I see. But really what kind of in my years of learning beside my children and facilitating their learning, I know that as an example, I have to be a continued learner. So I'm so aware of how we do our lives at the moment. You know, like especially when my children were younger, I remember saying, again, you have these ideals, like I want to see them. I want my children to see me with a book in my hand more than my phone. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult because I often say to my kids, this is kind of how I work. This is where we do everything. But that is my heart. I do want them to see me hungry and learning and adventurous and being amazed by wonder and booking trips to the art gallery and reading them incredible books because I want them to see the fruit of that kind of life, of a learner's life. So staying intellectually alive is about, what is it that I can do, even a tiny thing and again, I know that often people will say, how do you have time to read? You know, how do you have time to do these things? But if we have, you know, I'm going to be, you know, if you have time to scroll, you have time to pick up a book, you have time to read a little bit of a poem, you have time, you know, to read a chapter of a book slowly. And I, again, have learned to integrate little habits and rhythms to allow myself to be a continued learner. So I'll have a little stack of books that I dip into in the morning, or when I'm having a lunch, I'll have another little stack of books that I will dip into. At a weekend, I like to try and read a bit more. But there's something that it has done in me that has allowed my children to see, oh, this is worthy of investing your life in, is actually being amazed and in awe and wonder of what is around us, great thinkers, great artists, the natural world. And I know so many of you do this and love that. In fact, Charlotte Mason was so into this. So she wasn't a mother, or she invested her whole life into childhood, but never mothered her own children. But her and a team of people believed in this investment so much that they created this thing called the Mother's Education course. And I've dipped into it a little bit. I've looked at some of it, and it's so hard. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I have no idea what the answers to these questions are. I don't know if anybody's looked at it before. But they expect, and I think she, over the years, people fed that back to her, and she did. Rather than it being a 3-year course, she made it into a 2-year course, and she started to tweak the questions a little bit. But she really, you know, and in this course, it was about faith, it was about health, it was about philosophy, and it was about nature. And she saw these 4 elements and many others being part of the investment that mothers need to continuously have. Again, hear me saying fathers as well, into their lives. Now, during the First World War, there were massive changing priorities for women and mothers, as we know. And I think the course just didn't continue. But this idea of this continuous learning journey has always been inspiring to me. And I really, you know, it's part of the longevity, the secret of longevity, if it were, of not just keeping going and kind of surviving in the homeschool arena and with your children, but feeling like you're thriving in this setting as well. And I have, you know, we have walked all sorts of journeys in the last 15 years. I mean, and things that I don't share publicly because it's my children's story. So if you were sat in my living room, it's different, isn't it? But believe me, we have gone through all sorts of things, a myriad of challenges and changes and difficulties. But because I am convinced that we are the primary educators of our children, because I am convinced that parents have the most powerful, no matter what's going on outside, that we have the most powerful influence in our children's lives, I am continuously passionate about home educating my children. And I feel like it's a privilege. So I pull myself back up, grab a book, grab a friend, whatever it is, and we'll go into that in a second, and continue in this really privileged position we have. One of the little tips that came from an article I read from sometime in the 1900s was this story of a mother of, I think she had like 8 children, so a little bit more than Juliet. She had 8 children, and she was a big reader. And this woman said to her, how do you do it? How do you keep stuff going and keep reading and raising all these children? And she said, I have 3 books on the go at the time. And I'll quote, she said, I always keep 3 books going, a stiff book, a moderately easy book, and a novel. And I always take up the one I feel fit for. That is the secret, always having something going to grow by. If we mothers were all growing, there would be less going astray. So she had something going all the time. And I love that. I love that. And she talks about usefulness and how you don't have to rush through things. And I don't know about you, I sometimes see these Instagram posts where people show how many books they've read in a year, and it's like 306 books this year. And I'm like, what? How did you do that? But for me, the goal is to read something continuously, to keep going. And I think we have to be realistic with ourselves and each other. Yes, have goals. Yes, push for great things. But I like that idea. Have a book that's challenging, a book that's fun, and a book that's teaching you something, and read a little bit when you feel like it. It's a great idea. Some of you may be you may be studying at the same time. Some of you may be doing doctoral thesis and you're actually still at university, or you're lecturers. Some of you are listening and you are desperate to get back into university and finish your degrees, whatever it is, and that's all amazing too. What I'm really speaking into is, as we as parents are in the midst of this stage of really being on the ground, in the trenches, as we say, home educating our children, that it's important that we continue to learn and grow. And I think I'm probably, speaking to, because you're here on a Saturday morning listening to a talk, I think we might be on the same page with that one. So a few little tips with this one. You don't have to go at this alone. Find companionship in community. Have a book club, join a forum. There are loads of organizations. There are podcasts that kind of help you with things like listening to poetry, reading literature, even if it's just one friend. There are so many apps now where you can talk to each other, not texting, but I'm a big fan of voice messaging, which isn't always everybody's idea of fun, but I like things like Voxer and WhatsApp messaging. And I've got a couple of friends that will often just read things to each other over those apps. So I've got one friend at the moment who's reading this amazing theological book. I can't remember what the author's called. And every Saturday morning, she reads me a little section of it because she knows that I love it. I've got another friend who'll just randomly read poetry to me and we do it back to each other. But have somebody just say, hey, can we read something together? A book club doesn't have to be, as we know, during this pandemic, a book club doesn't have to be every Tuesday night, we drive over half an hour across the city and somebody has to tidy their house and make tea and cake and we all sit together. It can be just a continual conversation. Hey, what are you reading? Can I read that with you? Read one chapter of a book together. It doesn't matter. Do it in community. Find companionship. It's such an exciting, wonderful thing to do. Read a little bit every day. You may not be able to spend hours. You may have a breastfeeding baby and a toddler and a 6-year-old who's trying to grasp his first letters, and you might have an older child who wants to do music clubs and sports clubs. I get that. Life is so full, but I've started to do things like pop a book in my bag, stick one on a Kindle, have an audiobook on the go. But let me encourage all of us today to continue to grow, which is a learning journey. Oh, time is ticking. Okay, second one, to play. This is a great one. This is fun. Just before the 3rd lockdown, I've lost count of how many we had, but I think it was the 3rd lockdown here in England. Another friend and I just said, right, we've got one day, everything's closing, we need some time out. So we jumped on a train, went to Birmingham, and we went to the art gallery there together. Now, we could have gone for a spa, probably not, that's probably closed. We could have gone and had our nails done or gone shopping or something like that. But we knew what our souls needed. We knew our way of playing was to go without children, with a good cup of coffee, and wander around the halls of this art gallery. And we did. And there is part of Charlotte Mason's encouragement So one of the ideas she throws out there to mothers is this. She says, try, and she says, look long and well at just 2 or 3 pictures. And it is, I don't know if you're into art at all, but I really am. And again, just for the sake of beauty, not because I'm an art historian or I need to kind of pick it apart. And as you can see, we've got Raphael. That's who, oh, I can't, how does the pointing work on Zoom? There we go, Raphael. That's who we're studying at the moment. And I've just booked to go to the V&A to see some of his stuff actually in London. But we just have it, that's just printed off from my computer, stick it on the wall, you know, look at it, talk about it. And it's just this simple way of absorbing beauty, of really engaging with something outside of our normal lives and ourselves. And this particular day, my friend and I, it was quite emotional because we were just about to lock down again. But it was just this companionship of wanting to seek beauty out before we couldn't for a long time. And in fact, that particular gallery doesn't open again until 2022. I don't know why, but I can't remember why. But we just wandered around. We looked at, you know, Degas, Millet, Cassatt, and we just breathed in the beauty and the history and the heritage in front of our eyes. We didn't need kind of this tending to us physically, we just needed to do something for our soul. And this is the whole thing of how do we examine what going out to play means. Now, I know I know from within this community, there are people who do book clubs together, there are people who will crochet and knit. I think it's amazing, and do creativity is a brilliant way to play, whatever that looks like. There are people who hike together, who go on walks, and this is something outside of kind of trying to carve out some time, however you can do this, whether it's half an hour or a whole weekend, whatever it is, to be able to invest in friendship and in your own soul. I'm going to use that word, to invest in your soul. So this is what this instruction to go out to play was this mothers, fathers, we need to make sure we prioritize this. Now, the secret with this is not waiting until you are exhausted and you collapse and call it, I'm meditating or something, you know, you collapse onto the floor and say, I'm having a break. This needs to be part of the rhythm of our life. Now, there's a writer called Julia Cameron, and if you are an artist in any way, you may have heard of her. She wrote a book called The Artist, I think it's called The Artist Way. And she talks about having an artist date, which I thought was fantastic. Now, she isn't speaking into parenting or motherhood or home education. She's speaking to artists. But I took from this idea, and she talks about once a week having an artist day on your own, a solo exhibition. She says it's a once weekly festive solo exhibition to explore something that interests you. She talks about journaling. She talks about going to galleries. She talks about firing up the imagination and sparking whimsy in the mother, in the father. When was the last time you did that? When was the last time you did something just for the sake of being in awe and wonder? And I'm trying to integrate this again. Some of these things seem so ethereal and so kind of out there and idealistic, but you know what, if we can put into our lives TV and scrolling and the internet and all the stuff that we do, we can put into our life, we can add it back into our lives, wonder and whimsy, for the sake of our souls, because that is what our children are seeing. And this is the stuff that stands the test of time. This is the stuff that lingers, this beauty. I'm reading a lot at the moment about books are a bit far away to grab, but I'm reading a lot at the moment about beauty and how this one book about beauty overcoming darkness is a theology book. But this idea of seeking it out every single day. I write a gratitude journal, you know, I actually seek this out and look for it. And my kids see it, they notice it. Yes, do I deal with all the normal stuff? Of course I do. Do I deal with all the hard and the tears and the traumas of life? Yes, of course I do. But I have added and woven into the rhythms of my life things that I call play, that allow my soul to be fed and to keep going. And as home educators, we have to keep going, don't we? We have to keep that moment of and this has been tested. I mean, goodness, in the last year, I think I went through a phase of following as many galleries on Instagram as I possibly could so that I could look at the art on my screen, because I couldn't go to a gallery. Good tip. I will share a few of those if you follow me on Instagram. There's some brilliant ones. So here's, again, a practical thing. What does play look like to you? Ask yourself that question today. What does that look like? I know you're all working hard. I know you are just going for it with your children. You love doing all these things with your kids. But what does it look like if you could take a moment out, an hour, half a day, to rest your body and delight your soul? Make a list. What would those things be? I know not everyone can do this. If there are single parents in the crowd who are listening to this today, have you got a friend who you can do this together with? I'll give you an hour. You give me an hour. Let's make sure we invest this in each other, and it will, and your kids will see it. I know I tell my children, this is important for me. I'm going to go out for a walk on my own because I need it. And they know I come back and I'm a different person. But, you know, drink your favorite tea, take a walk in the park, sit and listen to the birds, go out in the morning before anybody else wakes up if you get that privilege. Stare at art. I have a print above my desk. I have these things on my wall just so I can look at it. Journal, write stuff down, read poetry aloud. That's kind of stuff that some of us do. You know, the list is endless. For you, it might be something completely different. Go and have a haircut, get your nails done, go and visit your grandma and ask her a million questions. Whatever it is, find your expression of play. Okay, so here's our instruction: to grow, to stay intellectually alive, to play. What does that look like to you? Make a list, prioritize it, and do it. Go for it. And the final one is to stand. Now, this is an interesting one because this has involved our response to our children, and this is to stand back. Now, I know there's been some amazing talks this week, and I've dipped in. I listened to a whole one on unschooling. I think it was Heidi. It was amazing. And this idea of standing back and not hovering, interfering, and being super like, what are my kids doing and what's going on? Again, from the inspiration of my reading from Charlotte Mason, she said this: the mother would then be able to hold herself in wise passiveness and would not fret her children by continual interference, even of hand or eye. She would let them be. This follows her instruction to go out and play. So here she is, this educational reformer, this educational, she turned the thinking upside down. She spoke into some great, amazing places for generations, for 100 years, speaking about the quality and the type of education that all children should receive. But there's this chunk in the threads of her writing that says, hey, you know what, parents, educators, you need to invest in yourself. And if you do that, this will enable you to just let your children get on, to let them be kids, to let them enjoy the awe and wonder of childhood. She talks about holding ourselves in wise passiveness, like knowing who you are, back to this identity thing, not fretting about your children, but knowing you've set things in place so that they can learn and grow and thrive. And I love that. One of my favorite phrases, and that I mention all the time in my coaching and courses and talks, is I say to people, trust the process. So whether you are, whatever your philosophy of education is, we are all here as parents and carers and teachers because we trust childhood. And that's the thing we need to come back to again, is that they're born learners. They're born eyes open, hungry for the things, hungry to learn and engage and absorb the world, because they're kids. They're amazing. We need to learn from them. But I always tell people, just trust the process. Trust the process. My youngest child, I think just before me, there was a session on learning to read. But here's my a quick story as we finish up here. My youngest child took the longest time to read. She doesn't mind me sharing this story. We've talked about this together. So all my first three children, did all similar kind of foundations and beginnings. I'm very kind of organic about how they do that, just introduce them to words and books and rhyme and rhythm from the moment they can, they can hear it. And my first three were like, I'm not going to particularly say ages, but they were, they were reading and sort of progressing in their words. And I was confident it had clicked and they were moving forward. My youngest did not happen that way. And it's interesting that she'd heard the stories, she'd absorbed the same atmosphere of words and rhymes, and we'd been starting to, you start to like look at should I do more phonics? Should I do this, that, and the other? But in every other sphere of her learning and development and understanding, she was alert and vibrant and bright. But the decoding of those words just didn't click with her. And I'd been home educating for years. I'd gone through this process. I'd sat in all the conferences. I wasn't concerned until well-meaning family members started to suggest things about her. And I don't know if some of you have had this, if you've had people say these things, but there was all these kind of suggested names of various diagnoses, and not that that would bother me, and learning difficulties, cousins saying things that people just, I'm like, when did you all get an opinion on how I'm doing this with my child? I knew she was going to be fine. But when these voices started to come in, even after years of home educating and believing and trusting the process, I started to doubt, and I started to get, oh goodness, am I doing something wrong here? And I didn't see, any of the signs of difficulties. Really, she had no issue with it either. People would say to her, she had some kid. I remember some neighbor kids saying to her, "Oh, can't you read yet? Can't you read that?" And they were all in school, of course. She said, "I can read. I can't read all the words." Like, good on you, girl. You keep fighting for yourself. And I had to regularly remind myself to stand back, to not overly interfere, and to trust the process, to be wise and passive, but yet keep her exposed to the right things, and to allow my daughter's natural learning process to take place, and to celebrate the gifts, the skills, and the habits she was shining in. And I did stay resolute in that, and you'll be pleased to know, the story ends well. She's she's 10 and a half and fluently reading, like, books, big books. And even yesterday she said to me, "Do you remember, Mummy, when I couldn't read all the words and people used to say things?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You were proud of me then though, weren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was." And she said, "And now I can," oh, I'm feeling teary now, "and now I can read big books." Like, yes, you can. But that was a big lesson for me in standing back and allowing the natural learning process to take place in her. Charlotte Mason, again, she says this: wise and purposeful letting alone is the best part of education. But I know, and it's a huge exercise in trust, but it's also part of us, our adult, our mothering, our fathering. The process is to stand back and watch these things happen without interfering too much. And this letting alone, and again, Charlotte Mason uses phrase masterly inactivity, is not, she doesn't talk about letting the parents off. We've got to, it's a big job, isn't it? And you're not kind of cutting them wild like a loose horse. This trust is based on our commitment and work, but also our belief in childhood and in their learning processes. And it's this wonderful dual working together, which is such a privilege, and we don't see anywhere else. Okay, I am wrapping up here. I know the time is ticking away so quickly. So we see here in these three things, when life throws everything at us, and we feel like we need to fix everything and know all the answers, I want to encourage us to continue to learn and stay in a place of growth, to remember rest, invest in yourself. I haven't even used the phrase self-care, have I? Because I don't use that word, but I believe in this, that actually we need to invest in our inner lives so that we can pour out into our children. And also this continual trust process, what you're doing is wonderful. This investment in your children's lives and in the trust process of knowing the power of childhood, the wonder of childhood, and the power of the learning process is at work, and it is amazing. We get to continue these ideas, this work, this overflow of who we are and what we believe in and what our convictions are every single day. And we get to make it our own, which is incredible. I'm rushing to the end, but I want us to remember that actually in all my story, in all the years, and I've got a few more left ahead, that these, the everyday conversations of curriculum and books and methodology and the details of our day never really settle unless I am putting these things in place. And I talk and I coach and I listen to people who are very, very weary and very tired, and they're Googling school places and they're wanting to find a way out, but still feel like they should still be doing it. And I always come back to these things, how do you view childhood? How do you view education? And how do you view yourself? And if those two things somehow find their place in equal way, if they find their place in peace, you can continue the work of a home educator, and you can deal with the change that is thrown at us and the curveballs that are constantly coming, because you go back to these things. This is what I believe about childhood. This is what I believe about education. And this is what I believe about myself. So hopefully you somehow will feel an element of inspired by some of that, and also take some of those tips to be able to go away and do something about. I don't know if we've got much time for questions, but I'm not sure if there's anything in the chat. Oh, I'm just pulling it up here. Charlotte Mason, first advocate of self-directed learning. That's right. That's absolutely. Somebody asking, do mother culture groups exist? I don't know, Debbie, actually. I don't think people call them mother culture groups, but I think that I know there are groups of people who have things like book clubs and crochet together whilst reading books, which I think is so beautiful. I don't think they particularly call them mother culture groups, but there are definitely those who gather to make sure they're investing in themselves. I run for the past few years, obviously not during COVID, I've ran a retreat up in the Lake District. And the last one we did was particularly focused on investing in mothers. And it was more of a mother culture weekend, and it was great. We had a belly dancing class. We had somebody teaching us how to felt. We went for walks. We had like afternoon tea. I mean, it was just wonderful. So that was fun. Oh, amazing. Okay, so last year's talk is available on YouTube on the Learn Free channel. So if you want to hear me talk about the longevity of homeschooling, there were 10 tips for that. I can't remember what the talk was called. Playing the Long Game, it's called. That talk is on YouTube, so you can go and check out that. Oh, and I've got a message down here. Let's have a look. Oh, thank you. So thank you very much. I know we've got to wrap up, Dore, don't we? But I don't know if we have a book winner. Do we save the chat, Dore? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So I think it might be worth choosing somebody now, if you wanted to do that.
Okay, let's have a quick look. So if you weren't here earlier on, I did a little book giveaway. So I'm going to send Natalie Ewings. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You have won this book. Is Natalie in the room? Is she still here? You can give us a thumbs up or something, but we'll send Natalie this book. And Danielle Farrell, you're going to win this book. Yay. There we go. Okay, so I will, let me jot, Kat, can you jot those two names down for me? Is that all right? So we've got Danielle Farrell, and I've got Natalie Ewing. and we'll get your addresses and send those to you. Great. Congratulations to our winners.
Yes, well done. Thank you so much, Leah. That was amazing. I could see people watching very intently. And, you know, people have been really encouraged. You've done a great job. Thank you so much. I just want to remind you guys to please attend the 4 o'clock closing.
Yes.
It would be lovely to see you there, and just have some final words from Juliet, our organizer. And she'll probably give you some information about next year's conference as well, I'm thinking. So please do attend. We look forward to seeing you. And thank you again so much, Leah. It was amazing.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
See you all
Bye.
soon. Bye.